toward Russian support for Assad. Moscow's ties with Turkey and most Arab governments have not suffered notably in response to Russian support for Syria. Russian-Turkish trade is booming. Putin and Erdogan seem to have agreed to disagree on Syria. The new military government in Egypt has soured on the Syrian opposition, and so this is not something that divides it from Moscow. In fact, what we're seeing, certainly in press speculation, that the new government in Egypt is so unhappy with the Obama administration that it's turning more toward Russia. Now, how serious this is, I think, is highly questionable, but this is what we're talking about. It's just how friendly are we? It's not that Russia and Egypt are disagreeing at all. While Moscow frequently cites what happened to the Gaddafi regime in Libya as reason for not allowing a Security Council resolution authorizing any use of force or even economic sanctions against Syria, Moscow is actually now starting to get along with the new government in Libya, at least as much as anyone else is, notwithstanding the recent attack on the Russian embassy there. Russian businesses starting to go back in, discussion of Russian arms sales to Libya, discussion of Russia training Libyan soldiers. The new regime isn't quite so bad as Libya. And of course, Moscow, the Shia-led government in Iraq, with which Russia has strong economic ties, are basically on the same side as Syria. Indeed, Moscow's policy towards Syria has not appreciably damaged Russian relations with most Middle Eastern governments, with the exception of Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Moscow sees these two as supporters of radical Sunni elements in Syria, elsewhere in the Arab world, in Central Asia, and inside Russia itself. Now, for their part, these two see Russia as aligned with their Shia opponents in Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. Saudi and Qatari actions, or perhaps more accurately, Moscow's interpretation of their actions, have only served to intensify Moscow's desire to prevent the violent downfall of the Assad regime in the hands of Sunni radical forces. So, they're determined to do so. They think it's the right thing. They have lots of things that are going their way. But there are limits, I believe, on what Russia can accomplish in Syria. Moscow clearly wants to prevent a Western intervention in Syria as occurred in Libya, and this goal appears likely to be met, not because of Russian ability to prevent it, but because of the Obama administration's unwillingness to undertake it. But while the West is unlikely to act to bring down the Assad regime, in my view, the war there is continuing with no end in sight. Moscow's preferred outcome to this conflict is similar to that which former Syrian leader Hafez al-Assad achieved in 1982, the Algerian military achieved in the 1990s, or what Putin and his Chechen allies accomplished in Chechnya, the defeat of the Islamist opposition and the restoration of state security service control. But even without Western intervention or major support from the opposition, this outcome appears either unlikely or very distant at the moment. The Assad regime may not be ousted, but the war is likely to continue indefinitely despite Russian and Iranian support for the Syrian government. We've heard from other speakers that perhaps the Assad regime can at least hold the western third of the country, but that they're having just problems with manpower. So Moscow, in my view, is stuck in something of a quagmire in Syria. It really doesn't want that at all. Further, Russia's not in a strong position to bring about a negotiated end to the conflict. It may be that nobody else is either. But if a settlement of the conflict is to occur, it'll probably require heavy involvement on the part of the United States, Europe, Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and even Qatar. Should such an effort succeed, the influence of what are now the Assad regime's adversaries may well increase in Syria, while that of its current supporters, including Russia, may decrease. Also, the possibility of an Iranian-American rapprochement could complicate Russia's Syria policy. If such a rapprochement occurs, one element might well be increased Iranian interest in reducing or even ending support for Assad. And there have been some interesting suggestions in the Iranian press recently about how, in fact, Assad is, shall we say, less than an asset for Tehran. If this occurs, if Iran and the U.S. somehow achieve a rapprochement, Moscow would be left supporting Assad virtually alone, or finding itself with little role to play in an Iranian-American agreement concerning Syria. If, on the other hand, Iranian-American relations remain hostile and Iranian support for Assad continues, Moscow may not be in a position to effectively pressure Assad into making any concessions for resolving the conflict if he thinks that he can survive with the support of Iran and Hezbollah, and not necessarily with Russia. Thus, while Russia can help the Assad regime avoid being overthrown, it's not in a strong position to end the war, either through helping Assad crush his enemies or provide the requisite incentives and disincentives for a successful conflict resolution effort. Finally, if radical Islamist forces grow stronger inside predominantly Muslim regions in the North Caucasus, the Volga regions of Russia, as well as Central Asia, the fate of Assad, whether it's win, lose, or draw, will be of less concern for the Kremlin in dealing with what will be far more urgent matters. Thank you.
Finally, Dr. Radwan Ziadeh, who is a visiting scholar at the High University and a fellow at the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding in Washington, D.C. Since the Syrian uprising started in March 2011, he has been involved in documenting human rights violations and testifying at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. He is the founder and director of the Damascus Center for Human Rights Studies in Syria and co-founder and executive director of the Syrian Center for Political and Strategic Studies in Washington, D.C.
Good evening, and thank you first for the invitation. I hope if I can get an extra time, since I'm the only Syrian on the panel, but I'll try my best. Since 2002, became very interested in transitional justice studies and concept, and tried actually to transfer this concept into the Arab region. There is no such research, even that the concept itself is very controversial in Arabic language. And this is actually, and at that time, most of my study was focused on Iraq, on the massacres committed by Saddam Hussein, and the mass graves has been discovered in many areas after the fall of Saddam Hussein regime. And by the way, I've been detained by the Assad regime because I supported the US invasion into Iraq. And also studied in Syria in the 80s, where actually we call it as years of fear, when until now more than 17,000 has been disappeared during the fighting between the Muslim Brotherhood and the security forces, and their families of course know nothing about them until now. It's been more than 30 years. And that's led me, of course, to study and to travel around the world, especially in Latin America and Eastern Europe, who actually did a great job and deal in transitional justice mechanisms regarding truth-seeking mission and other issues. When the Syrian uprising started, I thought that it's the time now to try that transitional justice in my home country. As you know, the Syrian uprising started peacefully with a large participation from the female activists. This is the photo from Homs, where actually 90% of the peaceful protesters are women. And that's, I'm being the connection here because in my travel, I traveled to Bosnia, and this is actually in Srebrenica, where the huge massacres have been there, and the United States helped building this cemetery and opened by former President Clinton to memorialize what's happening there. And this is why it's during the Balkans War, the concept came back again, what's called never again. The never again concept, it became after the Holocaust, and even became after every massacres or war crimes, crimes against humanity, that we should build an international system, not allow what's happened to happen again. And this is why we thought the international justice system built in a way not to have for massacres or war crimes, crimes against humanity, even genocide, to repeat itself in the globe. But I never thought that what will happen around the world will happen in my home country, or even that will happen in my hometown. This is actually a massacre happening in my hometown, Daria, was 7 kilometers southern of Damascus, where actually the largest massacre happened in Syria at that time in August 2012. And actually the guy sorry for the picture, but in the blue shirt, this is my cousin, who's been actually killed by the security forces. He has 3 children, and of course, even at that time, and until now, there is no place to bury them. And this is the mass graves in the city. They just put them in the city area, which unfortunate, there is no dignity, and above all of that, just give you a sense of exactly, even that you've been killed by the security forces, by the Assad army, there is no place to bury your beloved one. And this is, of course, some of the pictures of what's going on in the city of my hometown area, which 240,000 population in the city, only 1,000 left in the city. The whole population moved to be refugees in Jordan, in Lebanon, or displaced. My mother in Turkey, my sister in Jordan, my brother in Lebanon, another sister in Saudi Arabia, and this is the case for most of the families in Syria, because we are talking about more than 4 million refugees and 9 million displaced. What's the response? And this is the questions. We just got comments from Ban Ki-moon about denouncing the massacre in Daria. And what's new and really actually terrifying, that because what's happened in Rwanda and other massacres, one of the reasons why of the never again theory, because lack of information. But the Syrian uprising, the most documented revolution even in history. We have more than 1.5 million YouTubes, which actually documenting day by day what's happening in the country and what's going on. What's new that we know the murders. It's not, and they are proud of they did. Those actually who committed the massacre in Daria, they posting YouTube and posting their own photos on the Facebook, and they proud of they did. But this is actually, it's give you just a sense of how the spread of the culture of impunity has been spread in Syria. And it's even that the city, when the massacre happened in August 2012 in the Daria, which is quite famous as the city of the peaceful uprising from the day one. This is one of the pictures where actually the people carrying out flowers and to give it to the security and to the army to send the message that we are not in war with you, rather than we need to build a new future. And of course, the guy who's been beyond all of that, Riyad Matar, who's a friend of mine, who's actually an ambassador for attend his funeral in Daria. He's detained by the security forces and delivered his body to the family after 3 days. His killing in September was a landmark in the Syrian uprising. But again, it's in Syria, it's exactly like Tunisia and Egypt, it's unpopular uprising. Popular uprising has no ideology-less, leadership-less, and no leadership. And this is why we don't know exactly when the Syrian people decided to take arms to defend themselves against the security forces. It was not the leadership like South Africa, which we know exactly when Mandela gave the interview to the BBC saying that no more non-violence, this apartheid government, we used all that. It's not, this is a popular uprising, it's difficult. But exactly this picture summarized the Syrian uprising. When I visited Deir ez-Zor, and this is Ammar, where actually his mother put 2 photos of him in his grave. He's guitar player, and when he's decided to take guns to join the Free Syrian Army, and this is exactly summarized the Syrian uprising when people left the guitar, and decided to take arms in a way to defend themselves against the security forces. What Ambassador Ford and others use the term civil war. As Syrians, even that we are skeptical of using the term, and regarding in many perspectives. Of course, the first of that it's the number of the victims, which really higher than any normal civil war. And the second thing, the destruction in the country. This is some of the photos in my hometown in Daria. This is of course my building, which been now on the ground. This is go back again to the theory that's never again. It's Syria giving us, the story of Syria giving us a different response of this theory. Because we thought in 2005, when we built a strong international justice system, the International Criminal Court, and we developed the responsibility to protect through the UN, but none of these work. We saw the politics at the Security Council, where Russia blocking any actions and supporting the Assad government. With the same time, the destruction, that's giving the green light to the Assad government to continue to destroy what's left in the country. This is photos from Aleppo. Aleppo, it's the oldest capital on earth, according to the UNESCO. And this is why actually some pictures in Aleppo shows how the destruction there and how it became one of the oldest city. It's a city of nothing actually, and the Assad government targeted churches, mosques, and will focus more on the use of the Air Force, because if we talk about normal civil war, there is no such use of the Air Force extensively as the Assad regime is using. It's always around 30 to 35 rounds every day of using the barrel bombs. The barrel bombs, it's just the boxes of TNT, and it's drawn from very high and explode on the ground. And of course, the impact of that, it's huge. And there is no military target for the Assad regime can win or can take some of the territories on the ground. It just send a message that to make the life of the Syrians in the liberated areas impossible. And this is why the extent of the use of the barrel bombs during the Geneva talks. In my hometown, the Assad government dropped 73 barrel bombs just in 5 days of the negotiations in Geneva. It's more 166 on Aleppo itself. It was exactly a message: you can continue talking in Geneva and we can continue our work and business in the country. And this is, it's very interesting and became emotional every time. This is a picture I took in Azaz when I visited Aleppo. This is Scud missiles. Those actually long-range missiles, Russian, the Soviet Union provide the Assad government, and the United States consider the Scud missiles as a weapon of mass destruction in Iran, and that's one of the reasons of the invasion. It's the Assad government used almost 95, 96 of them. Launched them in the southern of the city, in battalion called 155, into the north. And it takes 15 to 17 minutes from its launch until to reach its destination or target. And the Syrian people, after of course begging to the United States and others to provide any type of protections, the United States provide of course the Jordanian with the battalion and the Turkish with the battalion, which can challenge those kind of Scots. And the Syrian developed an early warning system, its Facebook page. those the activists in the south, when actually one of the squad been launched, they put on the Facebook that the time, and this is why the people in the north, they have 15 to 17 minutes to escape. And of course, no luck. And this is the answer the questions where actually the death coming from the sky answer some of the questions when we see right now the radicalizations among the Syrian society as a response of the ignorance and non-support from the international community. I will end by saying it's of course the use of all the types has been used, the chemical weapons on Eastern Ghouta and in other types. Just few words, Ambassador Ford of course mentioned about our work in the Syria transition roadmap, which we believe that we thought it's difficult to bring the opposition in one organization, and it's never been the case in any of the countries, but it's important to have one vision to the Syria and to build a consensus and grounds among the Syrian opposition. And that's been announced on August last year, and we're being an advocacy meetings with all the different groups, even with some of the radicals, Islamic fronts and others, Muslim Brotherhoods, even the secularists, the Democrats, to build consensus about the Syria transition roadmap and get the support. Thank you very much.